Unicorn Riot recorded the Resisting Surveillance Forum in Roxbury on January 20th. Roxbury in Boston is home to a large Muslim community which has suffered from extensive state surveillance and subversion through programs like the Countering Violent Extremism program. So we got to learn more from the community about these social issues and how they've been affecting people. Alright, so once again, we're just waiting for the event to get going here. It should be going up in just a few minutes. This is the Resisting Surveillance Forum in Boston, Massachusetts. So thanks for tuning in. I'm Dan from Unicorn Riot. I think we're getting going.
Alright, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Fatima from the Muslim Justice League, and I want to welcome everyone here today for our Resisting Surveillance Forum, which some folks may have been to one of our previous fora here in Boston. What we've actually been doing for the past 7 or 8 months is we decided to take the forums that we have been doing here, which are really community discussions about different types of surveillance that are happening in the local community, and we've been actually taking them on the road essentially. So we've gone to Montgomery County, Maryland, to Chicago, to Minneapolis, and now we're back here in Boston as part of a larger series. So in each of those cities, we've been talking about different types of surveillance that impact that local community and any parallels that we see to other cities, if there are similar programs across those different cities. We've been talking about strategies to resist, what's working and what's not working. And that series overall has been done by MJL in collaboration with the American Friends Service Committee, the Defending Rights and Dissent, and Boston Workers Circle, as well as Young Muslim Collective. And locally, we also partnered with ACEDONE and a lot of really awesome local volunteers who helped put this together. I also want to start off with a quick question. So, who in the room is mildly to extremely disappointed with the state of news and journalism? Yeah? Awesome. That's what I thought. So we're really lucky today to actually have Unicorn Riot here. Live streaming this event. They also live streamed in Minneapolis. They have journalists in a few different cities, and they are journalist-run collaborative. So you don't have some super rich folks who own, a media company telling the journalists what to do. They decide what to cover. So they are covering really great topics like what we're talking about today. So thank you for that. There we go. And what we want to talk about today in terms of surveillance is, I know that for me when I was younger, and that for a lot of folks still today, when we think about surveillance, we think about really specific things. Maybe we think about Muslims specifically. A lot of folks know that Muslims are heavily surveilled in the US. And maybe we think specifically about cameras or people listening into phone conversations. But there's sort of a wide spectrum of what actually happens under surveillance. And that can range from using technology like video cameras, like social media, to track what people are doing, to see what they're up to. That can also include your actual interactions with the police, where maybe you don't know what information they're taking down about you, and also who that information is going to be shared with. So today we're going to talk about some different examples of those things that are happening locally, especially in a city like Boston, that I think, I'm actually fairly new to Boston. I moved here in July. And I know that this city, prides itself on being progressive, but we have a lot of really pretty backwards and terrible things happening in terms of policing and surveillance. So first, I'm actually going to have my friend Michael talk about his experience with surveillance in Boston.
Good afternoon, community, friends, and family of all. My name is Michael McMillan. I'm a community activist. I grew up in the neighborhood of Bromley Heath, which is in Jamaica Plain, which is roughly 10-15 minutes away from here. I'm here today to talk about drones that I've seen flying in my community in Bromley Heath. Back in July 2017, I was alerted through community residents from Bromley Heath that they had possibly seen a drone flying overhead one of the areas of Bromley Heath where there's a lot of common areas such as parks, benches, where people are either having regular conversations, cooking out, barbecuing. This is in the summertime, as you guys I'm trying to paint the picture for you guys. And so they had came up to me talking about that they seen a drone flying in the community, that they had no idea who was flying it, and it kind of just freaked a lot of people out in the residents, and it was kind of hoping that I can get down to the bottom of it. So later on that afternoon, as I was walking home, I seen two police officers, 2 cop cruisers across the street from my apartment building, which looked like they had a drone in their hand, and it kind of hit me that was the drone that the residents in my community had seen earlier that day. And so I sat outside for about roughly 10-15 minutes watching the officers play with the drone, look at the drone, observe it, and then start to fly it in the air for, I want to say the drone flew about 20 to 25 feet in the air. So after I seen the officers with the drones, I had photographed the officers, one with the drone on the floor at night, so there was a light on the drone that you could see in the picture. And then the second photo was the drone flying in the air that you could see with the officer with the controller in his hand and him looking at the drone up above him. So I snapped the photographs. I contacted a friend that I have at ACLU, and so she's a director of technology. Her name is Kate. I reached out to her. I sent her the pictures. I had let her know what I'd seen in the photos and what the community residents had told me earlier that day. And so I got the article right here. Later on, a couple months later, back in September, I got in touch with a woman by the name of Jane. She's a reporter for the Boston Globe. And so we had a quick conversation about what I seen, and she wants to know if I can get any of the community residents just to talk about what they've seen, just their opinions about how they felt about it. And so as I tried to talk to other community residents about if they wanted to report what they've seen to a news writer so they can kind of get their voice out there and let them know. A lot of them were afraidful. Some had prior records, some were convicted felons that they felt with them speaking out, it was going to be a threat to them, to their safety, to their harm, to their children. A lot of residents didn't feel like speaking up at all, and I couldn't barely find any residents to speak up. That was so much fear in their hearts. And so I got the article that the reporter wrote, and I highlighted a couple of things that I want to talk about that kind of just alarms me and myself and the community. And so ACLU had reached out to Boston PD, and so about the drones. And so at first the Boston PD denied the drone, even having access to drones, saying that they had no idea what myself and my community was talking about. They don't have drones, they didn't purchase drones. And so with that information, they had sent them the pictures that I took of the drones. And so they came back to, and then finally admitted that yes, we did purchase drones. They had purchased 3 drones for the amount of $17,500. And that's only 3 drones that they purchased with that money. The Boston PD wouldn't say that was state money or city money that they spent on the drones, and I feel like that's a big issue because that's our money that's being spent on drones that's not being alerted to the community that you guys are making these purchases. We're our money basically. And I feel like you guys have to tell the community residents, just not only my neighborhood, but Boston itself, let the community know that you guys are thinking about purchasing drones. They might be flying in the area of such and such neighborhoods, and just be on the lookout. And just for you guys to actually do that and not tell the community, that's a red flag right there that I really didn't take lightly. In my neighborhood, we don't have a community center at all. I'm 26 years old. I don't think we had a community center since my community since I was 21. There's no community center, but you guys are able to fly drones and pay for drones, and then also fly them in my community where BHA, my community is owned by Boston Housing Authority, but I don't see no real authority what you guys are doing. Another point, a police department spokesman said that the investigations are considering using the equipment due to its ability to photograph, capture aerial view of the crime scene, but there are no immediate plans to do so. If you get to that point, community input and discussion will proceed in any discussion to use the technology, said Lieutenant Detective Michael McCarthy. And just even with him saying that when they get to a point that they do buy drones, the community input will be welcome and discussed, and that's a lie because I already seen drones in my community. So for you to sit there and say that and actually want people in the community to believe your words, that it's falling on deaf ears. We're not actually seeing the drones in my community. Another quote that Lieutenant McCarthy said, he said that the drones are still in the packages. No testing has been done, McCarthy said in the prepared statement. Again, we're not using them. McCarthy said it was likely 2 officers photographed were playing with a toy, adding the officers are not authorized to use personal equipment in the performance of their official duties. So right there, McCarthy's either saying, one, the packages are still, the drones are still in the packages, the officers photographed with look like drones, either they're toys and they're not drones, and if they are toys, officers are on paid duty playing with toys. And so that doesn't add up at all. Again, City Council, Boston City Council President Michelle Wu said that she had not known the department had bought drones. So if the City Council doesn't know and being left out in the dark, only imagine that the residents in the community are being left out. So just think about that. That's really telling right there. So back in July 17th, when I reached back out to ACLU, they had filed a public records request on July 17th. The Boston Police Department denied ACLU's request for its policy on drones, saying that it was in the drafting stages. So within that saying, so if ACLU had filed a policy on the drones to see like what's the policy on the drones about the rules and regulations that you guys have with the drones. And so Boston PD basically said that there was no rules and regulations intact yet, and so that the drones wouldn't be in use until that policy was going to be intact, which that's another lie because the drones that we've seen flying in my community there are police drones. So, and that's pretty much all I want to say. Just keep you guys aware and just be informed about everything, and just start being more engaged with other communities, other residents, and just stay aware and just know what's happening in your community and protect you guys yourself.
Thank you for sharing that. And I can also say that those of us who are working on these issues right now are seeing this as a pattern of BPD, Boston Police especially, just going forward and doing things, and then when they get caught, then backtracking a bit. So they recently had a hearing for a money allocation for new software that they were getting, IBM software. That if you watch the way that this software is marketed, it's really marketed in a really disgusting way about tracking immigrants at the border. During the hearing about this, City Council asked, so is this funding to buy the software? And they said, actually, we already bought the software in September. This is to do extra training, to upgrade it. So we know that this is really a common occurrence right now. And we're trying to do as much as we can to find out about what they're doing, to call them out on it. But we really want to push to get to a point where they can't just buy whatever they want. They can't just buy the equipment and software without notifying City Council and the public and actually getting our opinion on it. This really points to what I was getting at earlier about the overall state of surveillance locally. So you might think, well, I'm not seeing drones in my community, or I don't feel like I'm being surveilled. Maybe you're not seeing some of the equipment that's being used. One, we're actually seeing a lot of things go up, especially in Roxbury and Dorchester. There have been a lot of license plate readers going up, which people probably don't know what they look like unless you know what to look for. And it's not just this technology on its own. It's really in combination with sharing that information with federal law enforcement like the FBI and like ICE, which is Immigration Customs Enforcement, and using any interactions that the police have with you. And when I say the police, I also mean school resource officers, which is the police that are in schools. So they can use, stop and frisk data, any, report that they might write about you, in combination with, say, photos that they find about you in social media. What we're actually seeing right now, in particular, is that something called the gang database is being used heavily. And if you have the handouts, so you can look at the back. The bottom section is the gang database section. So we're getting reports that the gang database is being used essentially to target immigrant youth, in particular youth from Central America. And I know when people hear gang database, you probably think like, oh, that's a list of people who have been verified and clearly identified as being part of a gang. Really, how you verify that someone is in a gang is using a 10-point system. And you can just get 8 or 9 points from an officer saying that you're in a gang. So it doesn't take a whole lot else to get put in that. So for example, and these are, the image here is just part of the verification list. You can go to the link at the bottom to see like the full gang database policy that BPD has out there. But you can see that, say, one law enforcement agency, and that might not be BPD, that could be a different law enforcement agency, saying that you're in a gang, plus clothing or known tattoo or a photograph of you with gang members could easily get you 10 points or more and get you listed in this gang database without you even knowing that you're in it. So we had a recent story that came to light, and we often don't know that this is happening because it's all very secretive, but we had a story about a kid in an East Boston high school. So I'm going to use an example of what happened. There was an altercation, like a verbal fight in the East Boston high school. So pretend that Michael and Burhan get into a verbal argument, and I'm the school resource officer. I'm the cop that's in the school. And I see Dan over in the corner. He's in the room. And for whatever reason, Dan, who just happens to be standing there, but is actually a teenage youth from El Salvador, I write down in my report that he is in MS-13, which is a gang that a lot of people talk about locally. And I write that down in my report. Maybe that's because I looked at Dan and he was wearing a certain shirt that had like the country code for El Salvador. Or maybe I went back to my office and when I was writing up the report, I looked him up on Facebook and saw, photos of him with people that I think are in a gang. But this school resource officer actually wrote that this kid was part of MS-13 in this report. The kid is not in MS-13. That report then went to BRIC. And if you look back at the front of the handout, BRIC is the Boston Regional Intelligence Center. What that is a center funded by the Department of Homeland Security. These popped up all over the country after 9/11. That's supposed to do counterterrorism work, but essentially allows ICE, so Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and the FBI to access information about local policing. So through the Boston Regional Intelligence Center, ICE saw this report from a verbal fight in a school that this kid was not involved in and was just standing in the cafeteria when it happened. Saw that this officer said he was in a gang when he wasn't, and went after that kid and detained him, and is trying to deport him now. It's actually pretty rare for us to even know that these things are happening, and we're hearing more reports of it now, that many youth are getting put in the gang database, and there's no way of knowing that you're in it. It's unclear how you could ever get off of it. And if you look, you yourself admitting, the self-admission that you're in a gang is only 8 points. Like, that's less points than an officer saying you're in a gang. So again, it just goes to show that like their perception is valued more than you yourself admitting to what you're doing. The Boston Regional Intelligence Center would also have access to the software that I just mentioned that they bought. And another report that we got recently, and this is maybe a good plug for folks who are interested in actually getting more organized around these issues. The way that I met Michael is through these meetings that we're having with some local folks where we're trying to gather more information about what's happening in terms of surveillance and other policing issues locally. So through that meeting, a friend of ours who does a lot of housing organizing was reading through development plans for the dot block development that's happening in Dorchester, which would be both residential and retail development. And they, after they found out what BRIC is, they realized that this line item is really terrifying. So you can see it at the top of the back of the handout. Listed under public benefits, the last line under public benefits is a $25,000 purchase of cameras. These cameras will be tied into the Boston Regional Intelligence Center and used by the BPD. I'm sure most folks who look at that development plan are not going to know when they see Boston Regional Intelligence Center that that means that's feeding directly to ICE agents or the FBI, which is terrifying. And these things go easily unnoticed. So this was from a memo that was, I think, passed in May of 2016. So this really goes to show that, that combination of information that they can gather about you, say from you happening to be in a room where a fight is happening, and then writing a report about you, and catching your license plate off of one of these license plate readers, or maybe a feed from a Dorchester development. You're walking by an apartment complex and you don't know that you're getting caught on camera. These have really dangerous consequences for folks, especially the most marginalized folks right now who are already under severe attack by the federal administration. So one thing that we're pushing is that the least that we can do is really think critically about how local law enforcement are feeding information to federal law enforcement without people knowing, and try to cut some of that off. So another program that I want to talk about before I hand it over to Burhan that's happening locally is the Countering Violent Extremism program, which is marketed as a program that is going to fight all types of extremism. But if you look at the language of it, violent extremism, radicalization, terrorism, I'm sure most folks in this room and most folks in general are thinking of a certain community, right? Everything about these programs is geared towards Muslims. They always have been geared towards Muslims. The idea behind these programs is essentially that Muslims in general, or especially Muslim youth, all need this extra help to prevent them from becoming terrorists. These programs are funded almost exclusively by the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice. Some of these programs will come off as, youth mentoring programs or things that the community would actually want. And they will actually go after programs that are already happening and try to fund them. And what they're essentially saying is, Muslims only deserve funding and we only deserve programs because we're seen as a threat. They're not willing to, fund these communities outside of countering violent extremism or counterterrorism programs, which is really horrifying. And this has been happening in Boston for some time now. So there have already been a few projects which were labeled peace grants that have wrapped up recently. There are 2 new CVE programs. CVE stands for Countering Violent Extremism. One of them in particular I want to read some quotes from because it's the most disturbing one for me right now. So the newest CVE program that's happening here in Boston is called Youth and Police Initiative Plus. It's literally taking a program that was happening called Youth and Police Initiative, which essentially encourages Black youth to hang out with police because they think that will solve all of these problems. And they added the plus and made the program focus on Somali youth in particular under this Countering Violent Extremism framework. They suggest that one of the top risk factors for Somali male youth's risk for violent extremism is unaccountable times and unobserved spaces. I know that as someone who's not that old, when I was a teenager, I'm sure it drove my parents crazy that I had some unobserved times, and unaccountable times and unobserved spaces, but that's part of your life, right? That's your privacy. Teenagers deserve privacy, even if they're Somali. It's outrageous that would be the first risk factor that they see for Somali youth. A key tenet of the training is that underneath the antipathy and mistrust youth have for police, there is also a curious attraction to their power and ability to use it. They are enticed by their capacity to carry weapons, their loyalty, and almost gang-like dress code. So even in this program, they think that the only paths for our youth is to either join a local gang, to hang out with the police because they're like a gang, or to join ISIS or Al-Qaeda or whatever terrorist group they're worried about. And of course, they're not addressing the fact that they are admitting that the police have gang-like tendencies, in case that wasn't obvious. It's outrageous. As somebody who grew up here, who had 9/11 happen when I was in 9th grade, I know the way that the view from my teachers and my friends shifted of me. And we know that in terms of these programs, they are going after the most marginalized folks. So here in Boston, this program was announced on the anniversary of the Boston Marathon bombing. 3 of the 5 grants have focused explicitly on the Somali community here in Roxbury. We know that across the country, these programs happen, and they, are essentially dangling money in front of our communities and saying, this is the way to get money. You have to buy into this narrative that you have a problem that has to be dealt with. So I'm hoping that through the discussion today, we can talk a bit more about all of these different types of surveillance, because these programs where, say, a Somali youth goes to the Youth and Police Initiative Plus program and might not know what that really means, Say a police officer in the program goes back to his desk and writes up a report about that kid and says God knows what about them. Based on this trend that we're seeing with gang databases, based on how we know that law enforcement interact with Black and brown youth in general, we have to be concerned about these things. So next we're going to have Burhan actually talk about this same program that's been happening in Minneapolis, and hopefully he can especially talk about what they have been able to do to resist it. He's part of the Young Muslim Collective, which is an awesome organization, and I'll let him tell you a lot more about that.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Burhan. I'm from the West Bank in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I organize with a group called the Young Muslim Collective. And most of our organizing is around issues like CVE. And in the way that it takes shape in Minneapolis, it really warrants a response, especially if you're somewhat politically conscious, or if you live in that city, and in the way that the federal government attacks, where there's predominantly a Somali or immigrant community. And so, and especially the West Bank that I'm talking about, the Sea Riverside community, there's a large concentration of Somalis, immigrants that live in that community. And so, and obviously there's no coincidence that, when you have a large concentration of newly arrived immigrants, and when I say newly arrived, I'm talking about 20 years. And for some, young folks, 20 years is a long time, but it's actually not. And so it's a place, especially in Minneapolis, where we've been a target of surveillance. You had individuals being targeted. And I'll just give practical examples of what that surveillance looks like. And when they go after specifically religious people who are leaders of a mosque. There's an elder who actually had to leave the country for about a decade because of the type of harassment and surveillance that he was under for about 20 years. They were following him. And again, it seems innocent to a lot of us, when someone comes to your house and they're trying to talk to you and saying, hey, we want to talk to you about, the people that come to your space and come grab and eat, come eat with us, or come grab a drink with us. And all of that seems innocent, to be honest with you. And they're not arresting him, they're not taking any pictures, and I'm assuming they're not recording. Obviously, the agents themselves are a recording machine, because you're talking to someone who could retain this information. But so again, this is before a lot of this more out in the open CVE program that the Obama administration brought to life, and within this community, we also have community centers. And in the community center that I worked at as a youth worker, they had a citizens academy. I don't know if they have that in Boston, but that's where you go down to the police and they teach them, and then they take them to the jail cells, and they give them tours, and they sort of like train them about the criminal justice system. And then again, it was odd because again, you have a predominantly black immigrant youth being provided with the service. And a lot of us who work in these spaces, you're not second guessing it. You're thinking this is innocent. You're just taking these kids to these spaces and they're learning, and hopefully they'll become a police officer in the future. And again, when you actually learn and you're taught about the political nature of how police work in this country and in any government really, it's not to provide you with some innocent training about, to help you build your community and that sort of thing. You're a source of information. And so when I build that type of relationship with you, and this is how they do it in our communities. They come in with these programs, and we also have a bike for kids. Cops, bikes, something like that, and in our community where they literally take kids and they buy them bikes, and they dub it as helping at-risk youth. And then again, that's a way of building a relationship with the community, with this youth, and the child, you know, themselves, they're looking at it as again, as innocent. You know, you buying me a bike, which I'll probably sell, but thank you anyways, you know. So it's one of those things where it's their ability to infiltrate our community in a way where, again, if you're not politically conscious, you're looking at it, you know, at surface level. You're thinking, hey, you know, I didn't say anything, I didn't do anything. But again, you know, you can be anywhere, and they can, you know, that same cop or the cops know your name, they can just grab you off the street and say, hey, you know, he was in this program, go talk to him, we trust him or we trust her. And so, and, you know, and just to connect it to the CVE program, that's why it was much easier for the CVE program to take place in our communities, again, because, you know, you have a community that's poor of resources and any real opportunities. You know, it'll be hard for a lot of these organizations who serve the community to say no. And especially when you've been programmed and that type of police interaction is normal to you. Like I said, when you go, and you know, I'm guilty because, you know, like I said, I worked at this community center where, you know, you're interacting. We had an FBI agent who was a community liaison. Literally, she would walk into the building with her FBI, you know, photo, hanging out, you know, playing with kids. Anytime we would have community events, like it's normal, you know. And again, it's presented as a community building opportunity where, you know, maybe, you know, these kids will eventually join the force and they'll help us, you know. And again, people may not look at that as, you know, well, there's nothing wrong with that. They get a job eventually. But again, what you're doing, honestly, you're eroding the ability for us to trust each other, you know, and you're inflaming the level of fear in the community, where there must be something going on. Why are they here? And so, and these discussions do take place, and that's part of the reason why CVE programs are, you know, they can be established in our communities, because we've been convinced that there is a problem, that we are a problem. And I think, again, when you live in conditions where you know, the type of, where a lot of criminal activity may take place, you know, people, like I said, it's easy for people to be convinced, oh, you know, we have people being killed, people are being robbed, and so it's all right for them to infiltrate us in a manner that they are. And again, you know, it's a situation with the CVE program where they conflate, you know, these efforts. If we're talking about social services where, you know, you have, like I was talking about the community center, keep it strictly to serving the youth and the community without having any presence of police. You know, there's no reason why I should be playing basketball or at an after-school program where I'm doing homework and there's an FBI agent talking about, hey, can I help you with your homework? You know, it doesn't make any sense to me. It wouldn't make any sense to anybody to be in that situation. And so, again, with the CVE program, that's how they're able to come into our communities through these social services, because we need these resources. And the only way that these people are able to serve the community is if they go to the Department of Justice or a fiscal agent that's representing the Department of Justice to get those funds to say, you know, hey, we held this community event together where we brought everyone together, and, you know, everything is go happy, go lucky. You know, it was a go happy, go lucky event. And so it's been difficult in the way that we combat that, because, like I said, people only function as far as like what they can see and the results of it. You know, like I said, if I'm taking someone to a job or I'm providing homework help, that's what they will see. They won't see the politics attached to that service. And so YMC, Young Muslim Collective, we were able to hold these forums, much like this, where we're able to connect with the community and give them this insight about the community members and the community organizations that are part of this effort, and to be to be aware of it, and not just blindly be led into this effort where you think, hey, my child is receiving help. My child is part of this soccer program or this after-school program. and there's nothing wrong with it. But in reality, you know, the person who heads that program, you know, is using federal money that obviously has a lot of benefit as far as intelligence goes. You know, because, you know, again, all of it is political. None of that is given to you, you know, free, you know, just free. It comes with something. And so a lot of our efforts within the Young Muslim Collective is to raise the consciousness of people, especially young people, to sort of pick out those programs and be more critical of it in the way that they engage with it. So, thank you.
One other thing that I'll add about CBE and I think surveillance in general is that a lot of folks will feel like, well, things aren't that bad here, or CBE is not really, you know, that bad. And one thing that we know about CBE in particular is that it's modeled after the exact same program that's happening in the UK, which is 10 years ahead of us. And in the UK, it's actually, you know, legally mandated for all public workers, which the UK has a lot of public services, so healthcare providers, teachers, nursery providers, if it's a public nursery, have to use 22 indicators to determine if a kid or that kid's family is prone to radicalization. So literally a public nursery in the UK was rated inadequate because they were rated like not able to identify radicalization in kids aged 1 to 4. So that's what we're talking about. Like, that is the path that this leads to, and we would much rather get rid of this now before we get on that ridiculous path. Like, we already know that when a little brown kid named Ahmed builds a clock and brings it to school, he gets arrested because they think it's a bomb. We also want to highlight other local stories that are happening. We know that really the way that we have organized around this is through people sharing, you know, our own information. We essentially have to get organized, have to build our own network, because on the other side, they are heavily networked. They're sharing all sorts of information. They have the Boston Regional Intelligence Center, and they have centers like that across the country where they get to share information. So for us to really know what's going on, we have to be able to share what's going on with each other in the community so that we can support each other. So I will say also, you know, if you, like Michael, if you see drones, if you see other types of surveillance happening, or if you feel like you're being targeted by something like CBE, like something like the GAIN database, you can reach out to the ACLU and you can reach out to the Muslim Justice League. Don't worry about which one, just reach out to one of those folks and we'll direct you to the right people. But please do reach out if you have something like that happening to you. For now though, I wanna see if folks in the room have, you know, any stories to share, particularly those of us who are, you know, the most impacted by these types of surveillance. So we'll do some story sharing first, and then we'll also have some time for questions and answers as well. So if anyone in the room would like to share, you know, similar stories of surveillance that have happened to you, your family, or community, you can, you know, raise your hand and we'll go around the room.
One of the things that really does is go to something called Jamaat, which is, I guess, translated colloquially into Christians who use sort of like Bible study, I guess. People get together in someone's house, they like study the Hadith, they study the Quran, they like talk about it a lot, and usually gather at one person's house in Roxbury and talk about it maybe like once a week if you're like really religious or really into it, but once a month or something. And the
interested in that lately, how we have developed this system of like joking about surveillance. I've been trying to collect all of the memes that I see about surveillance against Muslims. I think I used some of them to talk about this event. And for folks who don't know, we can't launch into like a full Know Your Rights session, but just to understand that when the FBI shows up at your door, and in certain communities, there's a really awesome group in Chicago who did like a community survey to see how often that was happening in the Arab and Muslim community there, and it was at least 1 out of 10 people had been just visited by the FBI. Like they show up at your house. And if you even open the door, that can be seen as an invitation to come in. And they could put their foot in the door to make sure that you can't close it at that point, and walk in. I have family that has worked for the government for like 30 years, and they'll show up at that person's house, and that person will say, you know where I work. Like I work at a government department. You could easily go through the right channels if you need to talk to me about something and come to my office. And that's very commonplace for everyone under the Muslim umbrella. I will add that in that same vein, there are a few things that you can do to get plugged in. So for Muslim youth in particular, we have a workshop tomorrow where we're going to really go in depth talking about CVE, especially CVE locally. It's going to be led by local youth organizers as well as a couple of folks from the Young Muslim Collective. So if you're interested in coming to that and you don't have details about it yet, come up to me afterwards. And then generally for the Somali community, because CVE has been targeting that community specifically so heavily, Abdul Kader from ASAJON and MJL and a few other youth organizers have been talking about having a Somali discussion specifically in a couple of months, probably in March or April. So if you're interested in that, definitely reach out to us afterwards. We can continue with any community stories that folks have.
What is happening now, which is not new in Boston or in this country, it's been happening long time, especially if you're financially in the difficult conditions. It has accelerated now, and it's very painful to see a kind young lady sitting there and can't control her emotion because she's been humiliated. And it continues like that. Like brother, you're saying that the Muslims, I'm a Muslim, I'm not, and I don't have personally, aside from few people, the path of place, etc., that happen anyway. But it's not only Somali. In every person who does not approve this barbarous administration, these man-made laws, it will continue. One question I've got, anybody can clear it. Is this law is approved by the Senate and House, or is this just made by the police?
The CVE program?
Yes.
So it's not a law, it's like projects that are funded by the Department of Homeland Security, Department of Justice. So there are grants that go out to people. In the UK, it's a law, it's not a law here.
It's not a law, yeah. So in order to, before it become a law here or something, and just with a private meeting or something, to rallies, etc., it's probably not going to do anything. Do you have a plan to stop it? What is the action item?
Hey.
So what is the first thing you have to do it?
Yeah.
To record all the things that are happening there. For example, in this meeting, it almost really break my heart when I see a person like that is in the tears. To make a database with the videos, with the voice recording, with the writing or something, and collect in some place, and bring, and start here, and bring it to the larger level, and bring it. But unless you have a plan with a lot of people, they keep on doing the thing, and the same thing will happen that the famous poet that the first they came for the gypsies, and I was not a gypsy, and then they came for this one and that one. And sooner or later, everybody will be better. So have a plan, discuss the thing, and
Yeah, so one of the plans is this. What we're doing right now is to actually raise awareness within the community.
MJL, Young Muslim Collective, ASADON, and a lot of organizations around the country have been organizing around this together. So we bring it up at a legislative level, we bring it up at both at like the state and federal level, we bring it up at a local level. We have conversations with people who are taking that kind of funding to encourage them to not participate. One really awesome thing that Young Muslim Collective actually did was, in response to some of the programs they were seeing, if they weren't able to convince a program to not happen, they actually started their own youth mentorship program that was basically CVE free. So to give kids, an alternative to that program immediately. So there's definitely planning and things that are happening, and for folks who are interested, in getting more involved in that, there are lots of ways, and we're going to have some forms that go out at the end for people to sign up to get more information as well. The other thing that I want to bring up that he just mentioned is, in terms of CVE and the way that like counterterrorism frameworks run, it looks both at indicators of being Muslim, like religiosity. So literally a kid, a young woman starting to wear the hijab, a boy growing out a beard, which if you're not Muslim is not seen as anything, right, except maybe that you're a hipster. But if you're Muslim, that's seen as a sign of religiosity. But not just signs of religiosity are the indicators that are used. They actually look for those of us who are speaking out against injustice. So if you're speaking out against I can't even count how many wars we are participating in right now. If you're speaking out for Palestine, if you're politically active, you're more likely to be targeted by counterterrorism in general and by CVE. So the Denver Police Department has a CVE project where they're looking at not just Muslim youth, but they said they were going to look at immigrant youth, LGBTQ youth, and youth that associate with Black Lives Matter, because they're all seen as susceptible to violent extremism. So we know that these things easily apply to other marginalized groups who are also standing up for their rights. And what that means is, for us to be up here talking about it, this puts us at risk, to be honest. I worry about the personal details that I share when I talk about CVE, but the way to get organized around it is we have to do that collectively. When you are in a large group that's speaking out about it, it's much easier to protect each other from being targeted. Any other folks who want to share their stories?
thank you very much.
And we can
If
also...
you do this collectively, you're in good shape, and if you're not,
So,
you'll be coming in talking very loudly.
We can also take questions if folks have questions for anybody up here.
Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum. Buenas tardes. My name is Gabriel Camacho. I work for the American Friends Service Committee, mostly doing immigrant rights work at large. And one of the things I do is work with different community organizations in various municipalities in order to limit local police cooperation with immigration and customs enforcement. Sometimes they're called sanctuary cities, sometimes they're called welcoming cities, sometimes there's a variety, or safe cities. And we also are working on statewide legislation to do the same in the Commonwealth. So I want to give you an example that ties some of the things that our brothers and sisters on the panel said just before. And that is, I'm working in a city just north of Boston. I'm not going to mention the city nor the names of the organizations involved or the individuals involved because it's an ongoing campaign. So what we're trying to do there is limit that police department from holding people for immigration and customs enforcement. And one of the things that we found out in our grassroots organizing is that this local police department willingly holds people without any judicial review for immigration and customs enforcement. And upon talking to the police department, we learned that certain, and I'm reading because I want to be very accurate, we learned that certain behaviors are markers for gang-related activity. This includes wearing garments with the number 503, which is the international area code for El Salvador. We also heard of other cases where indicators of gang-related activity includes sporting tattoos or wearing a Chicago Bulls cap, because that's the symbol of the Maras Salvatruchas, one of the infamous gangs in El Salvador. And through our work, we were able to obtain the policy, the official policy from that particular police department on how they identify gangs and why they hold people for immigration and customs enforcement. And here are some of the elements. We have the hard copy, we have everything, but here are some of the elements. The police department will not routinely inquire into immigration status. However, it will cooperate with immigration and customs enforcement when, quote, serves safety interests. Who defines safety interests? 3, will only check immigration status, and remember, they said they won't routinely, but they will check immigration status for a felony and misdemeanor arrest. What else can you be arrested for? It's either a felony or misdemeanor. There's nothing in between. Or check this out, questionable and or no identification. That means everybody. This is licensed to racially profile. 4, quote, check this one out. Reasonably suspected of involvement in terrorism and or subversive activities. And as we heard, if you are a political dissident, disagree with U.S. domestic, especially foreign policy, in particular in the Middle East, you will probably be labeled subversive. And finally, reasonably suspected of participating in a criminal street gang. That means any young Latino male who hangs out in a corner with 2 or more people, has a tattoo, wears a shirt with 503, Chicago's Bull hat, will be labeled as gang-related activity. So these are the things that are happening across the Commonwealth that we're trying to stop. It's been very difficult getting information, but we still do have those tools available to us in this country. And the other thing is that what's really interesting is that the communities are really coming together in a grassroots effort to stop this. People are not hiding. Yes, there is fear, and there is, people are emotionally distraught, but people are willing to fight, and I wish we could bring that spirit back to our communities and families, because that's the only hope we have. Thank you.
Who's next? We're on a roll. Can also do questions if folks have questions.
present those resources through Facebook to ACEDOM. So I know on this event page, ACEDOM is listed as one of the sponsors. Okay, and then also if people work in schools or with teens, I think probably by the end of the spring, these youth will be ready to come to schools and youth groups to be able to do those workshops. So if people have those connections, we'd love to link that with the ACEDOM page as well.
This is
Hi,
Hannah.
my name is Mr. Hall. I am one of the youth organizers that works with ACEDOM and CSIO. And, oh, microphone? Hi, everyone. My name is Mustafa. I am one of the youth organizers that works with ACEDOM and CSIO. And I just wanted to say that I'm really happy that we're having a forum like this, just because I don't think happen without the knowledge of the youth in particular. And what I feel like happens most time is that these programs and these initiatives and these, I guess, they're all targeting the youth, and these are people who are most affected by this. And so I think that's really great that we're having this open discussion, and I just want to express that to you guys. That's it.
And just a reminder for Muslim youth, Nasteha and a bunch of other folks I won't call out because they might get mad at me, but a lot of other youth who are in this room, and the Young Muslim Collective, we're running a workshop just for Muslim youth tomorrow. Youth, very loosely meaning 30 and under. So yeah, if you're questioning if you can come, just come up and talk to me afterwards. We'll have food and go really way more in depth about CBE and what we want to do about it locally.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. I just wanted to give one resource that might be available for especially Muslim youth. I volunteer with an organization based out of Chicago, and collaborating with Crisis Text Line, we've got Muslim counselors available for any children who might want to call in and chat with a counselor. So there's been a 606%, if I remember the figure, rise in profiling of Muslim children, and a lot of them are wondering where to turn to. So if you know anybody, and give this out to the non-masjid going folk, because 80% do not attend masajid. It's text salam to 471-471, you will be automatically connected to a Muslim counselor. The same organization also has workshops that they can bring in, where they train Muslim youth as to how you need to react. And I'm quite sure you have some workshops with MJL also, with how they can react if somebody comes in, talks to them. If something is happening, how do you record it? There is a central database available. This was done about 3 years ago. And how do you upload it so that it will be available if it is needed at some point in the future in code-based cases. So, thank you.
It's too late, she called you out.
Hello, my name is Alicia. I'm part of CSIO Youth Organizer. In my school, Margarita Means Academy, it's the first bilingual high school, and we've been doing a workshop last year. I remember I have this friend who's now a senior, and her father was deported when she was a little girl. So it's like I'm working for CSIO because I'm tired of seeing people getting hurt and being deported for no reason just because they have different skin color or not like the rest of us. I myself am different. I'm Dominican and Japanese. Yeah. Can I sit?
Yeah, go for it.
It's been hard for me as well because I'm the only Dominican and Japanese one in my school. So it's hard to find your own group or something like that. I'm not like, how do I say this? Like outgoing as other people. I'm more shy. If you can hear me rambling, and yeah.
I have maybe a quick hopeful observation and a resource to share. The hopeful observation, first of all, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your experience here with this crowd. A lot of the programs that were discussed today are things that are going to take a lot of community education and organizing to end and may have to involve advocacy to government bodies, city council, etc. But the hopeful point that I wanted to make was, in some cases, the education itself can help end the program, right? So when we're talking about countering violent extremism in particular, the commodity is not a special technology that they're buying. It's not that they're buying drones or social media analysis software, etc. necessarily for CBD. The commodity is really us. We are being bought, right? Positive programs in our community are being undermined through funding that engages them in surveillance, even though that may not be the intention of the folks who accept the funding initially. So the education, that's to say, can prevent us from being bought. And we can actually, prevent these programs from going further and unmask the lie that they're community driven once we can no longer be purchased, right? So that's the hopeful point that I wanted to make. And then the resource I wanted to share is just, a lot of folks have talked about being visited by the FBI. That's sort of a widespread issue. It is certainly in Muslim communities, but many marginalized communities. A few things to know. The Muslim Justice League provides free legal representation for folks who are visited by the FBI. We have a hotline. I believe it's 857-256-1310. And basically, we really encourage you to share with your family and friends what to do with your approach. A shout out to Nimra from Muslim Advocates, who I think is here, because they have an awesome video that we always screen at our Know Your Rights presentations. If you just Google Muslim Advocates got rights, like got no, you will find it. And it shows exactly what to do if you're visited by an agent, right? But the things to remember, don't answer any questions. If they visit, you can just be a broken record. You are within your rights to not answer questions and just say, be polite, obviously, because you don't want to be harmed. But I don't want to answer any questions without my lawyer. I'll have my lawyer contact you. If they press you and say, do you have a lawyer? You can say, I don't have one yet, but I'm going to get one. But just be a broken record. Eventually, they'll get the message. Don't invite them into your home. You can step outside if you feel comfortable. You can talk to the pants log if you prefer. And then once you have that agent's, all you need to get is the agent's number, phone number, and ideally their name. Your attorney will call that person back and on your behalf find out what's going on. But I really encourage you to look at the Muslim Advocates video. One other thing I'll say is state laws vary about reporting In Massachusetts, you don't want to secretly record a conversation. You want to file a wiretap statute. So if you want to record, you need to make sure that they know you're recording, that you're doing it openly. In Massachusetts, that law may change because it may not be constitutional, but for the time being, I would advise everyone in Massachusetts to secretly record.
And if anyone needs the hotline number, you can grab me or Shannon. We have our cards and we have the hotline on it in the back.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Betsaida Gutierrez. I've been a community activist for more than 40 years in Jamaica Plain. I'm basically on affordable housing. But in order to whatever the topic, I have been sitting there very quietly listening, and it brings me back what happened to my country and what happens to our communities when we don't have the information needed to protect our brothers and sisters, and just also analyzing Puerto Rico as a colony of the United States. For years and years and years and generations and hundreds of years, we have tried to become independent. But one of the things that has stopped us is being afraid. It's one. Secondly, it's not having the right information. The third is a trust. As a child and as a young person, I was never taught how to defend my country. And the only thing we can listen and read now how they made us afraid. They made many rules, United States, to keep us oppressed under their foot. And how, because the community as a whole, we're not organized and adding everything up, we haven't get to be free. So I'm very proud to hear what is happening here. I don't want anybody to flaw the way that I could be a change, because I learned that I'm dead first. They're not doing justice and having power to others. So it's very important. It continues in our history. We need to know all the information. We need to basically think. But please, another thing is not pass this information around. But there are many, many people who will get against because of the color. And that's another issue that we have to fight against her. What is the bad thing saying because of the color, where we come from, and if you're dead, you're going to get killed and all of that. But I truly believe I prefer to be dead, alive. I mean, be dead, alive, and I prefer to be dead from your speaking and helping people. So I thank you very much, but please, please, pass the information to others and give them the right information, because there's a lot of people giving negative. So thank you, and thank you for me learning today that history is Puerto Rico is going and going again. Power is what they want.
I'm going to call on someone back in a second, but I want to add something, bringing up Puerto Rico, that brought up something for me that in Arabic, bi'ahdami, and like I think that loosely translates to boiling or burning my blood. The CDE program from the Department of Homeland Security. So the way that the Department of Homeland Security functions is that there are a lot of departments that are under it, more than you probably know or imagine, including FEMA. So FEMA, which should be, I'm sure most of us think should be focused on emergency management, actually helps decide who gets CDE funding. And sometime after the hurricane in Puerto Rico, one of our colleagues in DC, who's at an organization that is very much against CDE, said, you know, we had a legislative staffer call us saying, hey, you know, FEMA is looking to distribute some funding for CDE, for countering violent extremism programs. Are you guys interested? And they were like,
what? How do you not know we're against it? Also, why is FEMA at all involved in this? Like, the only thing that FEMA should be focused on right now is helping these very urgent disaster relief efforts. So just a information sharing of how ridiculous some of these things happen that are under the Department of Homeland Security. The sister in the back. You had your hand up, right?
Okay, so my name is Esme, and I had a question. So, how are you supposed to know who you're supposed to trust? Like, is there anything we have to look for in people, because
Just keep it away from that. Keep it away from the speaker.
Is there anything you can look for?
that's a great question. Do one of y'all want to take that? I know, probably way too much.
So, yeah, I think trust with anyone, that's that's the biggest, that's the most important piece in any relationship building. And so that's a great question. And in the way that we were able to combat that lack of trust is by providing information that was mentioned earlier. And I think the more you know, the better you can trust the people around you, and the better you can combat that specific issue. And so it just comes down to how much you know about the issue, honestly. And for example, with the CDE program we're talking about, if you know, for example, that certain organizations have that money and somebody can provide you that information about them being involved, that's where you do your job. And once you know about their involvement, what we did in Minneapolis is we confronted them. We sat down with them. We try to have what you might call a community meeting to try to articulate the best that we could about why it was harmful to the community. But then again, like I said, the federal government knows that it'll be very hard for some, not all. You know what I mean? That some organizations will take the money, unfortunately. And so the best that especially the youth and the mothers in here and the families in here can do is really be up on the information that's available to you. And so if you know these specific organizations, you do your part by staying away from it, to be honest with you. And you do your best to really share that with everyone around you at school, in your own community, and that's the best way we can build trust with one another. You know, and if they want to come back into that fold of being trusted, then they have to publicly denounce their involvement in that program. And so hopefully that answers it. So.
And one thing we're gonna do tomorrow at the workshop is we're gonna talk about both like what we do know about what's happening in Boston already and which organizations are participating, and also generally how to like spot these types of programs, because they're not always labeled as, you know, CVE. Like the way that they do this is they rename these things, they make them seem like really friendly, community-led programs, and they hide, you know, the funding. So we'll talk more about that as well tomorrow. So I'm sure that there are probably more, you know, stories and questions to share, but I want to give you all a chance to hang out, to eat more snacks, get to know each other, especially for folks who maybe don't want to come up to the mic. Yes, and we have evaluation forms as well. And we have lots of us here who can answer questions if you want to get more involved in things. So I hope everyone can take a chance to fill out the evaluation form. Sue, can you raise your hand again? So Sue, who just stood up, will have these evaluation forms. We have some pens for folks to fill it out. I want to say thank you to everybody who shared today, folks from Minneapolis and everybody here who had the courage to stand up and speak out about this in front of this group, and we hope to continue building community with you all and building trust with you all and doing this information sharing. So thank you all for being here today.
All right, so this is Dan with the Unicorn Riot. We've just been watching the Resisting Surveillance Forum here. Thank you all for tuning in. I think the new video system works fairly well for us. Anyway, yeah, so we heard about various issues, including how gang databases are used to feed people's data to ICE, for example. We heard about, sorry, I just want to try to use this fancy new system here. Let's see if I can get it. There we go. So, we heard about how gang databases are used at the local level, a very loose criteria for who constitutes a gang member, and so that's been used to target people. It counts at 8 points towards counting as a gang, is just if police say you're in a gang. We heard about how there's questions about how do local municipalities and their police departments, what policies do they have on going to federal law enforcement, stuff like that. There's also issues with how, sorry if it's loud, I'll just try to recap here briefly. So we heard a lot about how, let's see, I didn't take notes, I forgot to bring a pen, but we heard a lot about how the Boston Police Department has been flying drones around without even the city council knowing that they have drones, or they try to play it off as private drones or something like that. Very weird stuff like that. Let's see what else. We heard from a lot of community members talking about how FBI agents try to ingratiate themselves in the community. We heard a lot about what's called the Countering Violent Extremism Program, or CVE, which then tries to release money. We heard about how that's controlled through FEMA. That was another highlight today. So we really got kind of a bit of a bird's eye view about how these different programs, especially how most of the programs involving CVE went after the Muslim community in the Boston area, stuff like that. So all of these things are kind of going on. They're not really being disclosed. They're not really being documented by the government. The government is trying to kind of relatively covertly co-op various programs. And so I just want to mention also before people hop off, Unicorn Riot is a 501c3 nonprofit media collective. And so if you want to support our work, please go to unicornriot.ninja and you can make a donation right there. We also accept cryptocurrencies. We have a thing to accept Dogecoin, Bitcoin, altcoins, stuff like that. We also have a PO box if you want to send checks, and everything is tax deductible. So I just wanted to mention that quickly. So again, and also another thing that people mentioned was that technologies like automatic license plate readers are increasingly coming into this community in this area. So all of these things indicate that the surveillance technology is not really being disclosed to the general public. The way the data flows from local police to federal authorities is not being documented, not really being widely reviewed. Will this be available on YouTube? I can see your Facebook comments. We haven't had any chats, I think, on live stream. Yeah, I think this computer was able to grab a capture, so I think I'll probably try to throw that to YouTube. Unicorn Riot does have a YouTube channel. We also have a live stream and a Vimeo account. We're also on Twitter. We're on Instagram. We do want to recommend that follow us on a lot of different platforms. Facebook is changing its algorithm. Anyway, again, so my name is Dan, and this was a real nice rundown. We really got some sense of how the local authorities, how the local federal authorities try to get the hooks into different organizations. So we had speakers from, Fatima Ahmad is the Deputy Director of the Muslim Justice League. Mikhail McMillan, the local resident who was talking about the drones that he found, and Burhan Mohammed from Minneapolis was from the Known Muslim Collective, who was over there on the left. So that's basically the overall situation. Again, it's pretty loud right here, so I should probably just cut it off right now. But again, thank you for tuning in. And again, you can support our work on our website. We have followed and done video at previous events, mostly in Minneapolis, with the organizers there. You see nationwide Muslim communities, Somali communities, the focus of very intense surveillance, very sophisticated programs. The Countering Violent Extremism program, or CVE, is based on a British program called Prevent. And I do recommend that you should just Google Prevent program. You can see pretty good stories in like The Guardian about all of that to give you some more perspective. So if you have any information about this kind of stuff, you want to publicize any of this stuff, please contact info@unicornriot.ninja, or you can contact us through Twitter or through the Facebook page. We're always kind of, just trying to get a sense of what's out there, trying to look into these stories. So thanks again for tuning in, and we really appreciate your support today. Again, you can support us. We are a nonprofit. So you all have a great day, and thank you very much for being with us. Thank you.